Vicarious trauma, also known as secondary traumatic stress, refers to emotional and psychological strain that results from exposure to trauma of others. The term was first popularized by psychiatrist Judith Lewis Herman in her 1992 book, Trauma in Recovery. Herman described vicarious trauma as the transformation that occurs in the helper as a result of empathic engagement and traumatic material. In other words, when professionals bear witness to suffering repeatedly, that exposure can quietly reshape their own inner world. Over the past 3 decades, this concept has expanded well beyond its original clinical context. It now informs research and practice across counseling, emergency response, and healthcare, including higher education, particularly in student affairs and housing. Professionals in these settings often serve as first responders for students in distress. They are called upon to listen, comfort, and mobilize resources in the wake of crises such as sexual assault, suicidal ideation, or unexpected death. Their empathy is essential, but that same empathy also makes them vulnerable. A 2015 study by Mitchell, Yoder, and Gentry found that student affairs practitioners working in on-campus housing are uniquely exposed to the cumulative weight of traumatic narratives. They are the first knock on the residence hall door after a crisis. They are the ones who stay with the student until help arrives, who make the late-night calls, who absorb the fear and the grief that hang in the air long after the incident is over. Exposure at this level can leave an invisible residue. Subsequent research by Hart and Kohlberg in 2016 documented common symptoms among professionals experiencing vicarious trauma: emotional numbing, hypervigilance, irritability, difficulty sleeping, and a general erosion of empathy. These symptoms can impair judgment and job performance. They also increase burnout and staff turnover, draining institutions of experienced professionals precisely when students need them most. It is essential, then, to acknowledge that vicarious trauma is not a personal failing. It is an occupational hazard of caring at work. No amount of professionalism or goodwill can insulate a person indefinitely from the emotional cost of bearing witness. The solution lies in awareness, prevention, and systemic support. For individuals, the first line of defense is self-care grounded in discipline, not indulgence. That means setting clear boundaries around availability, seeking regular supervision, and counseling when needed. It means learning to recognize the body warning signs: fatigue, irritability, detachment, and responding before they solidify into burnout. In professions built on service, self-maintenance is not selfishness. It is ethical responsibility. Employers must create environments where emotional well-being is part of professional development. That includes training staff to recognize secondary trauma, offering confidential counseling resources, and normalizing conversation about stress without stigma. Leaders should model vulnerability by acknowledging the emotional demands of the work rather than rewarding constant stoicism. Silence only deepens isolation, yet awareness alone is not enough. In recent years, our field has witnessed a troubling inversion. Personal pain sometimes becomes professional currency. Workshops and conferences intended for learning can drift into unsupervised therapy sessions where unresolved trauma is shared publicly under the banner of authenticity. The intention may be noble, to inspire to connect, but the effect can be harmful, both to the speaker and to those who are listening. Unprocessed trauma, when broadcast in professional spaces, risks reenactment rather than reflection. It can shift attention from students' needs to the speaker's need for relief. It can burden colleagues who are ill-prepared to absorb the emotional weight. It can distort professional norms, replacing boundaries with performative vulnerability. This is not to say that lived experience has no place in professional dialogue. Quite the opposite. Responsible storytelling can humanize policy, deepen empathy, and strengthen communities of care. But timing and readiness matter. Sharing one's story should come after personal healing and with an awareness of audience, context, and purpose. The guiding question should always be, am I sharing to teach or am I sharing to heal? If the latter, the proper space is therapy, not the staff meeting, not the conference podium. In many organizations, the failure to distinguish between these purposes has created what might be called trauma leakage. Unresolved pain seeps into supervision, performance reviews, mentorship. Leaders who have not addressed their own wounds may, often unconsciously, project them onto their teams. They interpret disagreement as betrayal, or they recreate in their subordinates the same conditions that once harmed them. The result is a cycle of emotional contagion, hurt people leading from hurt places. And we're all familiar with that idiom. Breaking the cycle requires what some scholars term reflective resilience, the ability to examine one's own emotional responses and take corrective action before those responses shape the environment. It means asking difficult internal questions. Where is this reaction coming from? Is it about this situation or about something unresolved in me? It is a process of emotional hygiene, and like any hygiene practice, it must be routine, not reactive. Leaders set the tone. A supervisor who models steadiness and accountability creates psychological safety for staff to do the same. A leader who frequently vents, overshares, or frames every challenge through a lens of personal injury teaches staff that emotional volatility is a management style. Institutions must be brave enough to name this behavior and compassionate enough to address it through coaching and support, not silence. And that goes for colleagues as well. The ethical imperative here is twofold. First, professionals must protect themselves from secondary trauma by maintaining healthy boundaries. Second, they must protect their colleagues and students from their own unprocessed pain. Empathy without self-regulation becomes projection. Care without reflection becomes contagion. When we speak about healing in professional contexts, it is tempting to treat emotional openness as inherently virtuous. But openness is only virtuous when paired with responsibility. The goal is not to create workplaces free of pain. That is impossible. But the goal should be to create workplaces where pain is acknowledged, contained, and transformed into wisdom rather than transmitted as harm. In practical terms, that means integrating reflective supervision into the culture of student affairs. It means treating emotional intelligence as a core competency, not a soft skill. It means teaching staff that compassion fatigue is real, that therapy is not weakness, and that doing your own work is part of ethical leadership. It means reminding ourselves that students, we serve are watching us closely. Student staff we lead are watching us closely. They learn not only from our policies, but from our poise. Ultimately, the conversation about vicarious trauma is a conversation about stewardship of our students, of our teams, of ourselves. We cannot pour from an empty cup, nor should we expect others to drink from waters that have not been purified. The work of helping others heal must begin with the quiet, ongoing labor of our own healing, which is a journey and not a destination. I'll close with this reflection. Being hurt is part of being human, but leading from that hurt without having faced it turns workplaces into mirrors of our own pain. If we want to create environments where students can thrive, we must first do the internal work that allows us to lead from clarity rather than chaos. That means acknowledging the emotional toll of our roles, seeking help when needed, and approaching others' trauma with humility rather than identification. The field of student affairs does not need unfeeling professionals. It needs self-aware ones. Our strength lies not in how much suffering we can absorb, but in how wisely we can transform that exposure into empathy anchored by discipline. Only then can we serve as both witnesses and guides, capable of holding space for others without losing ourselves in the process. If today's conversation resonated with you, smash the like button and think about subscribing so you'll never miss an episode. You can find my content on YouTube, Fanbase, Instagram, Spotify, and TikTok. And if you'd like to dive deeper into the topics, consider checking out the Boogie Down Scholar blog that's on WordPress. Help us hit 2,500 subscribers before we ring in 2026 by sharing the channel and dropping your thoughts in the comments. Got a topic that you want me to unpack? Shoot me a message on any of those platforms. I'm all ears. Until next time, be well, stay informed, and keep chasing knowledge. Peace and progress.